Hello. All right. Hopefully you can see me. Hopefully this is working. I've got my YouTube live set up on the side here to see if it's coming through. I don't know what was going on, but I had a whole countdown video and everything, but for some reason things weren't connecting, so I don't know what that was about, but it looks like it should be working now. So let me know in the chat if you can see me. Hopefully you can see the chat that goes along with the stream. Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know that you're here. Welcome. Again, sorry for kind of a late start and a weird start, but I have no idea what was happening. I don't think my software was sending the right signal, but I think it's all working now. So we will keep going. So welcome. Happy Sunday to you. Hope your week has gotten off to a really great start. I know mine has. So yeah, thanks for being here. Hope you're having a good day and hope this will be a good start to your week. I want to, as always, kick it off by saying happy birthday out there to anyone who is celebrating their birthday. Today is my wife Rebecca's birthday, so we'll be celebrating all day. We're going to do some barbecuing later, but like I've said, this is kind of a weird time to have a birthday. You don't get to see as many people, maybe just some family, but it can be kind of just a downer. So I like to take this time just to say happy birthday if you're celebrating your birthday, because I think it's worth recognizing. So if you're having your birthday out there and it might feel kind of lame, just know that I appreciate you and I hope that you have a really great birthday and a really great week. So I had my birthday a couple weeks ago, and it was pretty good despite, being stuck in quarantine. All right, we're also going to kick things off with our meme of the week. This is where I'd love to get some interaction from you, the viewer. So the meme of the week. I love this meme. It's called Surprised Joey, in case you aren't familiar with the meme. This is where, the first picture he seems pretty confident, and the second one he's surprised. And so it says bought snacks for before the quarantine. So maybe you made a Costco run before all this hit, and then you ate all your snacks within the first week, and now you're sad and surprised and depressed or whatever. So what I'd love to hear from you is, what is your favorite quarantine snack? So maybe because you've had to eat so much at home, maybe you've come up with a new snack, or maybe you have an old faithful that you always go to. So in the chat, please let me know, what is your favorite quarantine snack? What's been your maybe daily or weekly go-to that you've been snacking on? Because I need more ideas for snacks, and so I thought it'd be good if we shared some of those. For me, I don't necessarily snack a lot, but I do like to eat. But I've definitely been eating ice cream almost every day. I don't even know if that counts as a snack. It's like a full-on dessert. But that's been probably my go-to, would be snacks or chips and salsa. I love chips and salsa. I can eat like a whole bag in one sitting if I'm not careful. So tell me in the chat. Don't be bashful now. Tell me in the chat, what's your favorite snack? What's your go-to during our quarantine session? Let me know. Share with all of us what you like. What's your favorite snack? And if you are watching this later, which I know a lot of people can't watch live, but they watch it later, post your favorite snack in the comments down below after the live stream is done. Post your favorite snack in the comment. So unfortunately, this week I don't have an interview set up. I was hoping to, but it just didn't work out. I know a lot of people are busy. A lot of people, their schedules have changed and stuff. So I don't really have a interview this week. So I'm going to just kind of go straight into our devotional, and the devotional is going to be shorter too. I want you to know I'm working on some new things for the stream. I try to do something every Sunday to encourage people, and I've been working on some new things that I'll share more about that at the end. So things will hopefully be transitioning just a little bit, but I think it's important to try to connect in some way throughout the week. I know I do a Zoom with my students, but I want to put out some devotional material for maybe for some of my students, but also others who maybe just don't get enough of this. And so hopefully you find that encouraging, but I'm working on some new stuff, and so I'll talk more about that at the end. And also, I didn't forget, I do have my video from the Wheel of Boredom. I'll be sharing that at the end too. I think it'll work, hopefully. Okay, so Devo time. For the past 3 weeks, we've been talking about, again, the life, or the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. And we've been talking about how each of those pieces is significant for us. And so, to kind of springboard off of that, because, again, things are shifting around, and I'm hoping to start a new series soon, but I wanted to do some final reflecting on the resurrection, because really we shouldn't just celebrate the resurrection one day a year. It should be pretty much every time we get together as Christians, we're celebrating the resurrection. And so I wanted to share some thoughts about what does life look like for Jesus' disciples after the resurrection, and what can we learn from that? What are their responses and reaction to the resurrection of Jesus? How do their lives change, and how do our lives change as well? Because just because Jesus rose and he left doesn't mean the work is done. There's still more to do. But that experience was so shocking for Jesus' disciples that it kind of left them in a very confused state. Not just the death, but also the resurrection. They've seen Jesus a few times, and they don't really know how to react. And so this kind of leaves Jesus' disciples with this question, now what? That's kind of the title of our Devo today. Now what? And what I want to do is just spend some time reflecting on what life looks like after the resurrection for the disciples of Jesus. And I want to hone in on 3 responses, because a lot of them respond differently. And even though Jesus told them all of this, he told them he was going to die and that he would be raised and that they would see him again. He told them all these things. They still were caught off guard. But we can learn a lot from how they respond to Jesus and his resurrection. They were shocked. Some were doubting. Some were afraid. Some were full of joy. And Jesus meets them all with peace. He meets them with validation, with understanding, and he challenges them and motivates them to believe and to act in faith. And so we can learn things from what Jesus does to respond to his disciples, and we can learn from their reactions as well. So, like I said, I want to look at 3 people in particular and just kind of quickly go through their story of the resurrection and just kind of talk about how they respond. And the first one is Mary Magdalene. So if you want to follow along, like if you want to have your Bible next to you open, I'm going to be in John chapter 20 and a little in chapter 21. So right there in the same place, you can follow along. I'll also have it right here on the screen. So let me pull this up. Okay, so the first person I want to look at is Mary Magdalene. She was, of course, a very famous disciple of Jesus. She traveled with him probably most of the time, even if she's not always mentioned by name. And what's cool about Mary is that she was the first to see Jesus after he had risen. She was the first to go to the tomb that morning, and she noticed that the stone had been rolled away, and she goes to tell the disciples. And so I want to read through her story. So again, John chapter 20. Let me read through this. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said. "I don't know where they have put him." At this she turned, and she saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. So this is after she went back to the disciples and told them to come and look that the tomb was empty. And remember, Peter and John, they come, they sprint to the tomb. Peter goes inside, but then they leave. And so Mary's left there crying. So she turns around, she sees Jesus. Jesus, he asks her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." She wants to protect his body. Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to the Father and your Father, to my God and to your God." So Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. So the disciples, part of the 12, Peter and John, they leave, and Mary stays. She stays behind to mourn this fact that they can't find the body of Jesus. And while she's there, she has this encounter with Jesus. And at first she doesn't recognize him, but once he says her name, she sees who it is. Now, I don't really know why she didn't recognize him. It could be some mystical miracle kind of a thing where Jesus kind of clouded her judgment or something. Because, I mean, she spent years with him. Of course she would recognize him. That's not really the point. I think what's interesting is that he connects with her on a personal level. He says her name, and we can see the great faith that Mary shows here, because she was willing to stick around, and she was willing to go and tell twice now this good news about the risen Lord. So we can see that Mary had great faith. It's clear that she cared deeply for Jesus. I mean, she's standing there mourning over him outside the tomb. And she stuck around when others had left. She wasn't afraid. She was only, sorrowful, which rightly so. She thought that his body had been stolen. But we can learn some cool things from Mary. Mary doesn't really wait in this instance to ask that "now what" question. She takes action and she goes to the tomb, and yet she also demonstrates patience. Mary's faith is also something we can learn from, because she wanted to be with the Lord. And her patience and her persistence brought her into the presence of Jesus. So I guess one question we could ask, reflecting on Mary's story, is, what is something that you have to be patient for right now? What is a way in which you could show persistent faith with Jesus, and know that you have to wait maybe, but you're not going to wait passively. You're going to be bold in your faith. So that's Mary. She's got really one of the best stories, I think. So let me go on to the next person, and that is Thomas. Excuse me. So this is Thomas's famous scene. This is what really makes him well known, unfortunately, because this is not his best moment. In fact, he has a much better moment earlier on in his ministry with Jesus. He talks about following Jesus wherever he would go, even to death. So he has his good moments. It's unfortunate that he's known for this moment, and he kind of gets the nickname Doubting Thomas, and we'll see why. So Thomas had missed this first interaction where Jesus goes and he appears to some of the disciples. Thomas was not there at that time, and so later on they're talking about it, and Thomas, he doesn't believe. And so here's Thomas's story. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." Remember, they're telling him Jesus is back. He has conquered death. That's a huge thing to believe. But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again. So this is a whole week later. A whole week he went on hearing this and not believing. That's a long time. I mean, think about how long a week is in quarantine. That's basically what they were. They were hiding from people who were trying to kill them. So Thomas is with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." So Jesus confronts Thomas, knowing that he's doubting. Thomas says to him, "My Lord and my God." So he knows right away that this is Jesus. He knows that he is risen, and so he rightly so recognizes him as the risen Lord. But Jesus says to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." So Jesus has a good teachable moment here. Now, it's not bad that Thomas believes after seeing. I mean, you got to give him credit. He still believes. There's a lot of people who saw Jesus do amazing things and they did not believe. And Thomas does. But what Jesus is saying here is that it shows a greater faith when we believe without having to see. And some people might call that this idea of blind faith. And I think there is this idea of blind faith where you're believing something and you're not looking at anything else. You know, other factors, other influencers, other facts maybe. And you're just believing something without being, without really trusting. And that's not really what Thomas is doing here, I don't think. But there's something greater about putting your trust in something even though you don't have that assurance. So for Thomas, his now what moment was one of doubt. It's as if he said, well, Jesus, he's dead, he's gone, all of that's over now, so now what? I mean, you said you saw him, but I'm not going to believe that unless I'm there and I can put my hand in his side. If I can see the nail marks, I'm not going to believe. It's over, just accept it. That's kind of where Thomas is at. Since he didn't see Jesus, he couldn't believe his words or the words of others, because others were saying, hey, he's back. And Jesus said, I'm going to raise. I'm going to come back. But he couldn't believe that. So we see an important lesson being taught to Thomas, that seeing isn't always believing. In fact, it's better to have faith and trust in what Jesus is saying without having to see evidence of that. And, it made me think, we don't get to see Jesus, at least not in the same way that the disciples did. He walked with them physically, and we don't get that experience. So it takes great faith to trust in him. And I think the question really is, are you willing to trust him? Because that shows a great deal of faith, I believe. Another question we could ask is, how could your faith and trust get you through this time better than your sight? I think we're living in a time right now where a lot of people want some assurance. They want something that they can see. They want to see the hard facts. They want to know, when is this going to be over? But while it still takes faith, and to see, it shows greater faith when we could say, I don't know when this is going to be over. I don't have all the facts, but I'm going to trust that things are going to be okay. That I'm going to trust that God is with me and that he's doing something right now, that he's not just on vacation. He's doing something that I could be involved with, and I don't need to see it to believe that. All right. Third reaction is from Peter. Now, this is one of my favorite stories, and I'm going to read it in two sections here. In fact, this might be my favorite story in all of Scripture. And it has to do with the fall and the rise of Peter. Peter's, one of the most famous disciples, and he's well known for putting his foot in his mouth, acting big, and then not always following through in a way that matters. And Peter here has a huge now what moment with Jesus. So, a little backstory before we get to this text. Before the crucifixion, the last we see of Peter is his threefold denial of Jesus. And Jesus predicted that he would do this in a moment where Peter was acting big in his faith. And Jesus said, before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And of course, Peter was like, no way, that's not going to happen. Well, it does. And after that, Peter just drops off the face of the earth. We don't see him at the crucifixion scene. We don't see him until later, after Jesus has risen and there's talk among the disciples. He just disappears, and he has a lot of time to ask that question, now what? So let me read through this. So afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. So they've seen Jesus once, and this is an interesting reaction, because you would think that Peter would be all fired up, but he's not. Maybe he's still holding on to the shame of denying Jesus. Maybe he still doesn't even fully believe that what he's seeing is real, because his choice, his decision, after all of this that he's been through with Jesus, is to go back to his old life. He says, I'm going out fishing. That's what he used to do. He used to be a fisherman. And so that's his reaction. It's like, well, when all hope is lost, I guess I can fall back on fishing again. But let's keep reading. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John most likely, said to Peter, it is the Lord. So they're out on this boat, they look back, and they see Jesus. So this is skipping down a little bit. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off. He jumps in the water, and the other disciples followed by boat, towing the net full of fish. Jesus appears, he does his miracle, he tells them to cast their nets on the other side. They catch a ton of fish. They were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they had landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it, and some bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have caught. So Jesus does this miracle. That's very clearly the Lord. And once Peter sees that, he immediately jumps in the water. He doesn't even have time to turn the boat around, get it into dock or whatever. He jumps right out and swims as fast as he can to Jesus. And he has this really great redemptive moment. Let me keep reading here. This is skipping down a bit to verse 15. So they share this meal together, and this is where it picks up. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The 3rd time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a 3rd time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hand, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." So they share a meal together like old times. And then after the meal, Jesus does this thing where he asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" It's an interesting question. And it's also interesting that he asks him 3 times. Because we know, just like Jesus asked him 3 times, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So how you read this is important, because it could seem like Jesus is trying to guilt trip Peter, make him feel really bad. Like, "Peter, do you even love me?" Asking him those 3 times, making it very clear he knows all about the denial. But that's not really what's happening here, because look at how Jesus responds to Peter. He says, "Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep." He's talking about the calling that he's given to Peter. He is, instead of beating him down, he's reinstating him. He's lifting him up. He is telling him his purpose. And his purpose was going to be to care for people, for the Lord's people, and to help them grow, to be strong. And that one day he too would glorify God in his death. And he finally tells him that thing that he told him long ago, "Follow me." He says, "Keep going. Don't stop. Keep following me." So Peter, we see, was not really meant to be a fisherman. He was meant to be a fisher of men, of people. And even though he tried to go back to that old life, probably because he was scared and he was confused, Jesus reinstates him. He gives him purpose, and he helps him grow into that role of being a shepherd of Jesus's people in church. So we see 3 reactions here. We see one of patient faith, we see one of doubt, and we see one of maybe something that starts off as just kind of giving up, but turns into being empowered. And I think all 3 of them are important things that we can see and learn about how do we respond to this idea of the resurrection. And, thinking about Peter's story, it makes me think, it makes me ask the question, what is God calling you to do right now during this time of quarantine? And how do you need to step up and do it? Because I think he's given you value, he's given you purpose, he's given you something that you could do right now. You don't have to revert to your old couch potato self. I know I kind of get trapped doing that sometimes. But there's intentional, purposeful things you could be doing to feed the sheep of Jesus right now. So I'm curious to know, who do you think you might resonate with most out of these 3 people? Mary, Thomas, or Peter? I think I often find myself feeling a lot like Peter did. So that "what now" question, that's something that I want all of us to ask too. I think it's a good challenge for us. Now what? What now? What do we do right now in this certain situation that we find ourselves? We could be sorrowful and kind of mourn the fact that we're stuck and that life seems pretty gloomy and we don't know when the end is in sight. We could doubt that God is active and actively doing things. We could be afraid of what's next and just kind of choose to revert to what's comfortable or easy for us. But all of these things, sorrow, doubt, fear, all of them are erased by the resurrection, because Jesus puts those things to death. Now, that doesn't mean we never experience sorrow or doubt or fear. It just means that they can't control us anymore unless we let them. Because through the resurrection of Jesus, we have new life, new hope. And we don't have to be slaves to fear or doubt or sorrow. So Jesus calls us to believe, he calls us to rejoice, and he calls us to be active agents in his church. And I want to, excuse me, my cough's getting better, but it's still there. I want to encourage you with just some final thoughts. Maybe you're feeling down right now. Maybe you're really struggling, like this daily grind in quarantine is really wearing on you. And if that's true, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to talk. You can send me a message on Facebook or Instagram, and we can connect some way. If you're feeling down, this is not the time to socially isolate. This is the time to reach out. And I mean, I really believe that the resurrection of Jesus shows us that we are not alone and that we don't have to be slaves to fear, to sorrow. So if you're feeling down, if you are struggling with something, let me know. I'd love to talk with you. Or maybe on the other side of things, maybe you've had a lot of time to think during this quarantine. Maybe you've had more time to think about your life, and maybe thinking more about how can I align my life to the life of Jesus? How can I reflect the love of Jesus? What does that look like for me? If that's what you're thinking about right now, again, I'd love to talk. Let's chat. Let's connect and talk, because I'd love to guide you through that. I think the more people that we have guiding us, the better we can make wise choices. So that's my encouragement for you today. So I think about the resurrection. Easter may be over, but the resurrection lasts. The implications of it keep going. And so as we think about what does this all mean? What does it mean to follow Jesus after the resurrection? That's where we're living. And so I think we can learn something from these three people and how they responded to the resurrection and how they continued to grow. So, with all of that done, what I want to do next is share with you the video. I was challenged last week to, in my boredom, eat a very hot pepper. I'll give you some commentary after. I will say it was not a very fun experience. It didn't go as bad as I thought it might have, but I'll let you see what that's like. So here we go. All right, so I have here 2 habanero peppers that I got at the local grocery store. This is for my challenge to eat a really hot or spicy pepper. I also have my glass of milk here and a piece of bread. I don't know if that's going to help, but I figured if it's super spicy, I should probably be prepared. These are rated at 100 to 350,000 on the Scoville rating of spiciness or hotness or whatever. So yeah, they're pretty good. And I'm not a huge fan of spicy things, so we will see how these go. I'm only going to eat one to start, and if it's not too bad, I'll eat both of them, I guess. But it's probably going to be bad. Okay, so what you didn't see in the video, while I was eating the pepper, it really wasn't too bad. You can probably see like my eyes getting bigger and starting to breathe harder and sweat more maybe, but man, afterwards it felt like someone was stabbing my mouth with 1,000 knives for like 30 good minutes probably. So while I was eating it, wasn't too bad. Afterward, way worse. Do not recommend it. If you like spicy things, I really just don't understand. I mean, I like spicy stuff, but that's not even like that's like off the charts. It's like way too much. So, anyways, it's time to spin the wheel one more time, and then I'll wrap things up by kind of talking about where I hope to go next with the live stream. So let me share the screen here. All right, so I got my wheel here with all the different random things to make sure I don't get bored this week. I'm going to spin it. We'll see what it lands on. All right, walk the dog in my neighborhood in a funny costume. So first I have to find a funny costume. I've got some ideas though already. So I'll make a video of that or take some pictures or something. I don't know exactly how I'll capture that, but I'll have something for you guys next week. Speaking of next week, so I want to start, first of all, a new series, like I said, and my idea on it is a series called Radical Hearts. And what I want to look at is the radical nature of what it means to follow Jesus. Jesus calls us to do some things that in our world today seem pretty radical, like loving our enemies, being humble, things like that. And I want to look at each of those because I think it's very practical in how we can live those things out. Also, the stream might be changing a little bit. Well, hopefully a lot in some ways. One thing I have been talking about doing is partnering with Sam Mears, and we might be doing some kind of Bible study together. So the biggest difference would be you're not just going to hear from me. You're going to hear from my buddy Sam also. He's a great guy, and I think what we'll do is try to do this together, and hopefully that'll make things even more interesting and for you. What that means is it may not always be live like this is right now. It might just be something that we record and you watch later. But either way, I hope our main goal is to give you something to think about. Keep feeding you something. I mean, you can't go to Sunday class, to teen class on Sundays or whenever you do that. And so this is hopefully our substitute to help feed you, help make you think, help you grow. So I hope to be working with Sam in the future. It might even be as early as next week or the week after that. So I'll let you know on social media. Make sure you're following me, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. But finally, I really want to just hear back from you. How can we best encourage you to grow and thrive during this time? What kind of content do you want? How can we engage with you? How can we challenge you to grow? What are some things that you're looking for in a stream like this? Any content ideas that you have? If you want to see like more teens on the show or something, let me know. Again, you can send me a message on Facebook. You can make a comment to this video later. Let me know what kind of content would really help you be encouraged, grow, and thrive during this time. Let me close things out in a prayer, and then I'll let you go for the day. God, thank you so much that we can still connect like this. God, I'm just thinking about how lonely some people might feel right now, how concerned and anxious they might be for the future. I'm thinking about the students who would be graduating this June and won't get that same experience. Lord, this is a difficult time for a lot of people. And I'm also thinking about the people who are getting sick. And, we want to remember them as well. God, I pray that throughout all of this, you would remind us that you are in control, that you are actively doing things, that the church is not dead, and that our faith is not dead either. And I pray that you would help us see ways that we can grow, that we can thrive during this time, and that it will be something where we can look back and we can see your hand at work. I pray all this in your name. Amen. All right, thank you, and have a great day.